1969. Good to see you.
Good morning, Bruchim Habayim. Welcome to this wonderful event in honor of Rabbi Zuroff and in celebration of our collective formative years at the Yeshiva University High School for Boys, Brooklyn branch, YUHF, BDD, also known as BTA. I'm David Martin, class of 1492. The fact that BTA graduates at Baruch Hashem been successful in so many areas of endeavor and have made Aliyah, so many of us, is one of the wonders of the modern world. Who would have thought?
David, go to the office.
There are more than 100 alumni here today. Many others could not make it because of prior commitments or because they are traveling. They all send good wishes. We welcome, of course, Rabbi Zuroff, Mrs. Zuroff. And we acknowledge President Effie and Yeshiva and their children. Elaine Zuroff Kohler and her children. Unfortunately, my old friend of 55 years, Jerry Kohler, could not be here. Dr. Jerry Kohler, he sends his best wishes. We also thank the planning committee for this event without titles and in order of alphabet. If I stated everyone's titles, we'd be here all morning. Moshe Mel Benson Ben Zion, Aryeh Fuller, Zev Milty Gerstel, Yitzhak Erwin Mansdorf. A lot of people changed their names since they went to BT. I think they're trying to hide. Bobby Neymark, Yehuda Weinrauch. Rabbi Zuroff, I want you to know that during the email conversations preparing for this event, Eugene Weinreb and I communicated in French. Monsieur Machal, and Shlomo Stewie Swider, who put in an enormous amount of work in putting this together. Work on the planning committee was a special treat. 8 individuals, successful, heads of families, mature, all over the age of, I won't say, spent almost 2 months reverting to their childhood. Except this time, this was done in high technology. The ether resounded with scores of hysterical emails, evoking laughter so hard that it challenged my thoracic stitches. For a few weeks, we let ourselves go, and we imagined that we are still in infantile mode as prodigious students at BTA. Yet with all the humor and memories, the members of the committee worked day and night to make this morning a reality. Techezakna yedei kol ha'osakim b'melacha. Thank you also to the Bruce Center, to Mark Lerman, the director, to Mr. Sharabi, who is in charge of the physical plant, to the young ladies at the door, to Holy Bagels, to YU, and to the YU alumni who have provided assistance. Several alumni have pledged money to cover various extra costs, such as the video. Yishar Kochachem, if anybody else wants to donate money to cover costs, please feel free to do so. We also thank the young man who's playing background music, Ronen Goldsmith. Ronen is a very well-known Balkore in Jerusalem. He is just finishing his studies at Machon Lev in computer engineering. He won a major award for a project that he did. He's about to look for a job, so if anybody needs a computer engineer, and he happens to be married to my daughter. Ronan, you never know, you might get a job. Listen, I have to save some money. We are here to acknowledge Rabbi Zuroff, who exemplifies the rebirth of Torah and Jewish education in the United States. Rabbi Zuroff's father came to the United States from Poland, Ukraine in 1907. His mother could not get to the United States until after World War I, some 13 years later, and Abraham Nelson Zuroff was the youngest of their 5 children, the only one in the family to be born in the United States. The Zuroff family lived in Baltimore, Maryland, where the young Abraham attended the first BTA. In this case, the B stood for Baltimore and not Brooklyn. At the age of 16, he went to YU, where he was the president of the SOI, the student organization of Yeshiva. He studied for 3 years under Dr. Belkin, for 3 years under the Rav, which left a lifetime impression on him, and he received smicha from them. He also did his doctorate at YU on the response of the Rambam. At that time, the dean of men and also professor of Bible at YU was Dr. Samuel Shmuel Leib Sar, of blessed memory. Sometime at his funeral, Dr. Belkin said he was Mr. Yeshiva. That's what he called him. Dean Sar took special care of students who were not from the New York area. In the case of Rabbi Zuroff, Dean Sar made a special effort to make him comfortable, to make sure he was not lonely. And in 1945, I think it was, Rabbi Zuroff and Mrs. Zuroff, Esther Sar Zuroff were married. The YU tradition was maintained by Rabbi and Mrs. Zuroff. Rabbi Zuroff became the administrator and later the principal of BTA. Then he took on the position of supervisor of all 4 YU high schools. The Yeshiva University High School for boys in Brooklyn. The Yeshiva University High School for non-boys in Brooklyn. We weren't allowed to say the words. And of the 2 Yeshiva University high schools in one of the other boroughs, the name of which I cannot remember. Mrs. Zuroff had a long career as the director of student services at Stern College. So we are here to say congratulations to ourselves and thank you, congratulations to Rabbi Zuroff. We offer you the bracha of David HaMelech and Tehillim, Yamim al Yemei Melech Tosif Shnotav K'mo Dor Vador. The Devar Torah will be delivered by Rabbi, Dr. and Professor Aryeh Frimmer. The Ethel and David Resnick Professor of Active Oxygen Chemistry at Bar-Ilan University on the border of Ramat Gan and Bnei Brak. Despite all those titles, Aryeh actually never graduated from BTA. He went on to Brooklyn College on early admissions, but I can testify from the committee meetings, he's still BTA in his heart.
I would like to begin my words of tribute to our mentor, Rabbi Zuroff, with a recent anecdote. A few short weeks ago, the members of the organizing committee were sitting around shooting the breeze about BTA, and all of a sudden, someone on the committee commented about how amazing it was that we had all unanimously and excitedly agreed to honor someone who decades ago we spent 4 years trying to avoid. trying to avoid or outsmart. We didn't succeed at either. To this quip, another participant immediately responded that his years at BTA YUHSB were among the happiest and the most enriching of his life. As time had passed, it became clear to us that Rabbi Abraham Zuroff was the individual at the helm who created and controlled the educational environment. Indeed, who can mention the names of Rabbis Dardek, Yogel, Schmidman, Frankel, Bohensky, Clark, Heifetz, and Cooper, Doc Lichtenstein, Bob Bissell, Mr. Septimus, Lowell K. Sanders, Senior Cantor, Monsieur Maurice Marchal, and John Santiago. Among many, many other colorful characters and personalities without a broad smile coming over their face. And let us not forget the Little Red Schoolhouse, the pizza shop, the neighboring Erasmus Hall, as well as the creative antics of a select cadre of hyperactive students. As rebellious teenage youth, we wanted to run the school. And much to our chagrin and disappointment, Rabbi Zuroff would not let this happen. Where Tov Vavohu threatened to take over, Rabbi Zuroff held the course for calmer waters. It sometimes takes several decades before one has the proper perspective and maturity to fully appreciate those seminal experiences which help to form one's character and personality. And the special years we all spent at BTA are clearly among them. Looking around and seeing how many of us ended up here in Israel, and how, Baruch Hashem, how well we turned out personally, Jewishly, and professionally, it looks like Rabbi Zuroff and his staff did a great job. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered to pay homage to Rabbi Zuroff and acknowledge the profound contribution he has made to our lives. The rules of expressing thanks and hakarat tov are very special. The Gemara in Masechet Sotah, Daf Mem Amud Aleph, and also in the Gemara Yerushalmi, asks the following question: Bizman sheshaliach tzibur omer modim, ha'am mahem omrim. When the shaliach tzibur, when the chazan in Chazar Sashat says modim, what do the people in shul say? And various rabbis in the Gemara give assorted answers, and Rav Papa put it all together and constructed the modim d'Rabbanan that we now say. But all this leaves a very fundamental and basic question. How does the Gemara's question even begin? When the chazan says atachone, what do the people say? When he says Rafa'enu, when he says Shema Kolenu, what do the people say? The answer is, they sit there, listen attentively, and answer Amen. Why should Modim be any different? Why is it different than the rest of Chazar Shashatz that the Gemara asked? Ma pitom? I mean, what do the people say? Why are the congregation expected to say something during Modim? And the Svat Emet, or the Svas Emes, with Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib, Alter of Ger, gives a very deep and very insightful answer. You see, Modim is giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hakarat HaTov, for his daily sustenance and miracles. You can have someone else ask your requests for you. When it comes to thanks, you have to do it yourself. When it is expressing gratitude, each of us has to do it themselves. The community cannot stand idly by while the chazan says thanks. They each have to do so in their own accord. And similarly, the halach is by when you bring bikurim, and there is into the Beis HaMikdash, the Mikra Bikurim, the text of thanks must be recited by the one who brings the bikurim. You can't have intermediaries. You can't have shlichim. You have to do it yourself. So Rabbi Zuroff, close to 200 people here have gathered this morning from all parts of Israel to pay tribute to you. We have gathered personally to say thanks for the indelible impression you've made on our lives and for your long-lasting contribution to Klal Yisrael and the vibrancy of Jewish life in America and here in Israel as well. May Hashem bless you and keep you. May He give you continued nachas from your family, the Chol Yotzei Chalatzecha, and from all your Talmidim. Mazal Tov to you on your 90th birthday. Ki Orech Yomim Ushnos Chaim V'Shalom Yosifu Lach. Our blessings of Ad Mea V'Esrim in health, happiness, and prosperity.
That's BTA. Each of us has our own individual memories of BTA. When I was first married, I used to tell my wife BTA stories. She didn't believe a word I said. Until one day, one of my classmates came over to visit, and he told the same stories. She said, it can't be that you're both making up the same thing. So actually, each and every one of us should come up to the microphone and wax eloquent on his BTA memories. If we did that, we would be here until Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, the planning committee decided to divide those memories into three categories, corresponding to the three buildings in which BTA called home. President Street and Rogers, 2270 Church Avenue, and Avenue M and East 14th Street. A representative of one of the classes at each of those buildings will share with us their unique memories. As representative of the classes held at President Street, it is a pleasure to call on Zev Chamudot of the BTA class of 1949? 40? Zev came on Aliyah many years ago to found and serve as the first dean of the Shenkar College of Fashion, and then held important positions at Bar Ilan. Zev Chamudot, President Street.
Anyway, I can begin by saying, Hinei Matov Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. It's a wonderful thing that we're doing here today in honor of Rabbi Zuroff. Let me begin by saying that when I used to meet Rabbi Zuroff on several occasions throughout our Aliyah, the first thing I heard was, Wallace Chamides! Rabbi Zuroff remembered me when I was a Protestant and insisted on using that name, even though from the moment of our Aliyah and even before, I was known as Zev Chamudot. But anyway, I always was glad to see him despite that particular greeting. Even though Professor Frimmer gave a beautiful Dvar Torah, I feel that a Dvar Torah is necessary. So I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story about Metushelach. And that's where my Dvar Torah will begin and end. That Metushelach was a biblical character, a Torah character. And he lived to a very, very ripe old age. But not too many people know how he died. Metushelach died by a heart attack because he tried to blow out all those candles. Anyway, I would like to then further comment that there was a brief article in the Jerusalem Post describing this event, this very beautiful event, and it named some of the very illustrious graduates of Brooklyn TA, and my name was not included, even though it should have been included, because I think from the point of view of the alphabet, I come first, beginning with a C. But they chose to mention like people like Rabbi Riskin, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, and Alan Dershowitz, and so on. They failed to mention not only me, but they failed to mention, which I think is more important, a number of the people sitting at our table. My cousin, Pinny Khan. Now, Pinny Khan, I think, should be remembered because he was one of the genuine, accomplished Talmidei Chachamim to graduate from Brooklyn TA. So I think that in itself is a wonderful thing and should have certainly been mentioned. Let me describe to you a bit about my feelings going to Brooklyn TA. Now, I came from Borough Park, as many distinguished people came from, like Itz Greenberg and Alan Dershowitz and so on and so forth. Came from Borough Park, but in Borough Park we had streets that were numbers. I lived on 45th Street, near 14th Avenue. The streets had numbers and the avenues had numbers. When I heard that I was going to a place where the streets had names, like President Street, wow! I thought, what kind of place this must be? And Bedford Avenue, that sounded very impressive. I didn't know how to take it. I didn't know Maharet Sahib, Tovahi, Imra, are the people living in Machanim or B'miftzarim and so on and so forth. Anyway, simply the evolving or from the next step from elementary school to high school was a big step. But when we found out we were going to Brooklyn Talmudical Academy, the first thing that came into my mind was an academy. I used to see the advertisements in the end of the New York Times Sunday magazine. They talked about Valley Forge Academy and all sorts of very fancy, prestigious schools. And I said, wow, what kind of place can what can we expect? We had a uneventful education. Anyway, I remember, and I say this really very fondly and I think one of the most important things, coming from elementary school and really being still quite immature and going up to the high school, and we met people like Rabbi Zuroff or Rabbi Kanatopsky, who was my first Rebbe. I must say, I think the right word is I was in awe of them. Why? Because in a sense, these were the people that a person who actually had smicha and was a modern-looking rabbi and learned with the Rav. We didn't know a thing about the Rav. Rabbi Soloveitchik, that was a name that was sort of whispered around, and to think that these people actually got smicha from him, and we were going to study with them, that was really a truly important event in our lives, and I thank God for that. The last things I would like to say is this, that we have an amazing group here. I think the fact that there's so many of us have come on Aliyah, some longer, some shorter, but the fact that we've made a tremendous positive contribution to this, our beloved Eretz Yisrael. And we did it by really doing the thing that we were trained to do, to combine Torah and life, combine Torah with occupations, combine Torah with contributions to the state in every respect. I think this is a tremendous accomplishment that the beginnings of our success were to be traced back to Brooklyn TA. I just want to close with a Dvar Torah from my grandson, which I think really holds out and says that it was all worth it, that there's really tikva la'achritenu. I picked up my grandson, 5 years old, from his gan, and I asked him, Ma sita yom bagan? He said that they learned about staka. I said, oh, tzedakah, mitzvah chashuva ma'od. He says, yes. He said, ken. V'chayavim latet et ze b'seiter. Asur la'adam lakir mishu noten lo, mishu makabel shu makir mishu noten. I said, if that's the answer I get from my grandson in Gan, yesh tikva lachritenu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zev Hamudot. I was asked to remind everyone that after all the presentations, there will be dessert. So there's a reward for staying here. I was also asked to point out that on each table, there's a packet with 10 pieces of paper and 2 pens on which you can write greetings to Rabbi Zuroff. Please try not to copy from the guy next to you. As Rabbi Cooper used to say, don't copy from your friend, he knows less than you do. Okay. Whew. The Little Red Schoolhouse on the corner of Church and Bedford was built in 1875. It served first as Flatbush District School Number 1, and it then later took on another name, which was immortalized in the door handles. Does anybody remember? PS 90, very good. Go to the front of the class. From 1954 until 1968, the building served as YUHSB. Next door to BTA was the Erasmus Hall High School complex. I remember one day when a group of mild and meek BTA students were leaning out of the window on the second floor, and one of these B'nai Torah apparently made a derisive comment about a young woman from Erasmus. Within 5 minutes, the entire Erasmus Hall football team appeared in BTA and wanted to, with the intent of converting that BTA student into a football. Luckily, World War III did not break out. After BTA moved out, the building became the Lubavitch School for Girls. Not much of a transformation. In 2007, 132 years after it was built, it was declared a New York City landmark. There is a rumor that several goblins inhabit the building to this day. Every evening at 6:10 p.m., a ghostly bell rings. Several thousand ghostly voices chant, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Very good. As a representative of these ghosts, it is a great pleasure to invite a well-known figure in Israeli life in general, certainly in Jerusalem life, to regale us with his memories. Phil Chernovsky will give us some BTA tidbits.
Very, very hard acts to follow here. I want to start by saying that in our time, we were not allowed to call the school BTA. We had to say YUHSBB, where we didn't even know whether the first B was boys and the second was Brooklyn or vice versa. But we would get into trouble from that man if we said BTA. As a response, somebody produced BTA buttons, and we all wore them in secret, most of us inside the pocket. If you remember the pen hole, what it was called, pocket savers, which we had fun flipping people who had lots of stuff in their pockets all over the place. But the other thing I should have done, I usually honor an audience by wearing a tie when I speak. In the case of BTA, the honor is to take off the tie. If you remember, MTA students had to wear ties every day. And we didn't, which is the reason we didn't want graduation combined. But we had fun. They were up in Washington Heights, probably studying, and we enjoyed our education. 50 years, a story that now I will tell. I was on the audiovisual squad that had a couple of film strips and a tape recorder in a locked closet, and a teacher would request film strips, third period, and one of us would have permission to cut class in order to go and set up the film strip and run it. Some of the teachers said, no, I know how to run it. You put it down and go back to class. So we took a screwdriver and loosened certain parts of every machine. So for the teachers who had to send us back to class, we would count, and 2 minutes later, somebody would come in and say, could someone from the audiovisual squad come and fix the machine? And we would check it out with our screwdrivers and we would fix it. And get not what these on these badges here, the not excused admits. We had excused admits from Mrs. Roseman, and one time she forgot to put a date on the admit. I still have that admit. I've been saving it for the right time, and it hasn't happened yet. So another and then they closed BTA, so, you know, whatever. One other anecdote, opening day for the Mets in 1965. Practically the entire senior class went, and the next day, half the class was in trouble for going to the ball game. Why half? Because half the kids came with notes from their parents, how they didn't feel well, they had a stomach ache, and Rabbi Zuroff accepted all of that, and only those guys that came in and didn't have a note, they got in trouble for going to the ball game. I was a goody-goody at the time in charge of Pesach provisions, and I was counting boxes of matzah from Yeshiva University, and I didn't go to that game, but a lot of people got into trouble. Not a Devar Torah, but something related to it. First, there's the statement in Pirkei Avot of Mikol Melamdai Hiskalti. Then there's the statement on Yaakov Avinu's comment, Im Lavan Garti Vo'echarad Ota, where Rashi says, Im Lavan Garti V'taryag Mitzvot Shamarti, which I used to think was the continuation of the Pasuk. It was so famous. And then I heard a twist on V'taryag Mitzvot Shamarti, and I didn't learn bad things from Lavan, that was a criticism of Yaakov, that you have to learn not just positive lessons, but you have to learn from negative lessons and use them for positive. This we learned in math from Mr. Septimus and others in absolute value. The absolute value of +7 is 7, the absolute value of -3 is 3. So every positive lesson, negative lesson, teachers that excited us, teachers that turned us off, although I don't think we used that term in those days, teachers who we remember, teachers who we don't remember, all contributed to the people who we are. Elementary school was significant, high school was very significant. A lot of us continued on to Yeshiva University, not just for college, but for graduate school as well. And every BTA graduate that I find and that I see, as David mentioned, we have great fun schmoozing, and that tells you something. Because there are people who say, I don't want to remember my childhood, I don't want to remember the school that I went to, and I think people who went to BTA, especially those who are in this room, obviously had a positive experience, and you're the boss. We used to call, no, I won't say what we used to call you, behind your back. It was the kitzur of your first name prefixed by the word big. And I must say, all these years later, you still, in my mind, are a giant. I remember visiting Crown Heights Yeshiva years after I had gone there, and I found the school much smaller than I remembered. But having seen you over the years, you are as big and as great and as giant as you always were. I don't know how many classes can relate to what I'm going to do now, but it's something that 50 years ago I was afraid to do in your presence, and I finally got the nerve to do it. Know what that is? Anybody? No. It's a hockey puck, which we used to play with erasers or aluminum foil in the auditorium until you walked in. And I think you didn't like us scuffing up the finish in the auditorium. If you remember also, there were these 2 extra rooms they built in the back of the auditorium which had a low ceiling, and a puck or an eraser would go onto there, and we'd climb up, and one day in the middle of somebody's class, a foot came through the drop ceiling. It was an unofficial sport, a sport in exile, but one that we remember fondly. And believe it or not, I've taught it to my children and my grandchildren as well. Kol hakavod to you, and kol hakavod to all of us with fond memories of BTA.
Phil, that was really very good. Have you ever thought of writing something professional, putting it out every week? So we finished President Street, Church Avenue. It was the summer of 1967. BTA was moving from Church in Bedford to the old Vitagraph studios on East 14th Street and Avenue M. I was part of a group of students that came during the summer to move the Elkanite office and the Geo office. We were assiduously cleaning out old files, packing boxes, and loading them into Rabbi Wolfson's Cadillac convertible, driven by David Wolfson, when someone asked us to take a few cartons of supplies from Church Avenue to Avenue M. During the ride, someone noticed that one of the cartons held gold. 100% pure gold. A pad of admit slips. Rabbi Zuroff, I shall not discuss the fate of that pad of admit slips. But let me tell you that it financed the Elkanite. To tell the tales of Avenue M, it is a pleasure to invite Dr. Ari Schaffer, who is with the Volcani Institute, a member of the class, Ari, of? What? 72. Oh my God, a baby. Ari, by the way, is one of the world's experts on the botanical aspects of the etrog and maror. It's all yours.
Well, before I start, I really want to thank the organizers. I really think they deserve everything for this really fun afternoon. And not just fun, but meaningful. I'm sorry. That was supposed to be at the end of my speech, right? I really want to thank the people who spoke before me. Just want to remember the names. Rabbi Martin. Yeah? Am I wrong there? Am I right? Rabbi Frimmer, Rabbi Chamudot, Rabbi Chernachovsky, some of you Rabbi Doctors, Chernovsky. We go back. This actually gives you an indication of the myopic picture that BTA students have of their particular years. In other words, other than their particular layers, there really was no BTA. This is my first experience of a global BTA. So that when Aryeh asked me if I can give reminiscences of our period, I realized very, very quickly there really is no such thing. And it's really going to be a very, very personal reminiscence of basically my 4 years at BTA, because I don't even know who was the year behind me and who was the year ahead of me. And I don't know who was in the class next to me, and I certainly don't remember. But I would like to thank all the speakers who really make it very, very easy now for me to make my presentation, because at first my wife said to me, you can't say those things in front of these people. But after what everybody has said until now, I really feel much more comfortable. So thank you. Thank you. I also understand why Aryeh Frimer asked me to speak. I see we can actually feel the Nitkatnu Hadorot as we go from the earlier generations to the middle generations to the lower generations of BTA. I'd like to begin with the following. And actually, if I remember correctly, it's one of, nobody mentioned Chagigot, the Chagigas of BTA. And I think it was at one of our Chagigas that we came up with the salutation at the beginning of the speech that went something to the effect of honored rabbis, honored doctors, honored rabbi doctors, and I can now also add honored rabbi doctor professors, right? And of course, this was a childish reference, of course, to our Rabbi Zuroff. Of course, at that time, and as you'll see, and I think you've seen it already, and we could even see it until this day, there was a certain childishness, certain what we call, Rabbi Riskin used to speak about, people aren't not religious, they're at various stages of becoming religious. So we were at various stages of becoming mature, right? And some of us are still at various stages of becoming mature. But it's a tremendous, I think, very impressive reflection looking around here and seeing what came out of the BTA, 200 or more olim from BTA, with the BTA YU attitude of broad education, religiously committed, and I'm using those terms broadly, right? But definitely Jewishly, religiously committed, broad education, full of haskalah, who've come to Israel and have made some major commitments as American Olim to Israel life in all of the different manners. And here I'll quote something that my uncle, Dr. Benji Lerner, from the year of 1949, 1950, very often frequently says, if we look around here, we can really see the amount of education, the amount of haskalah, and to paraphrase my uncle, this room is literally full of BSs, MSs, PhDs, MDs, CPAs, BDEDs, MEDs, DEDs, LLBs, MSWs, and whatever else there could be. All right? DEDs, DDs, and DDLs. And I think that's a tribute to really what we picked up from BTA and from the whole YU atmosphere. And I think we thank Rabbi Zuroff, and I'll explain why we thank Rabbi Zuroff for some of these things too. As I said, I was asked by the organizers to reminisce about the years at BTA when it was Yes, put something on it when nobody's looking. And if you can turn the lights off, because the pictures are very poor quality. The pictures were taken from the 1972 yearbook, the El Chanait. And while I have it standing up here, this picture on the El Chanait 1972, I think, this picture on the El Chanait 72, I think, says everything about our period, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. We see a young man, small yarmulke, long hair, obvious revolutionary demonstration, blood going through his veins, with tefillin and holding up a Sefer Torah. And that was more or less the conflicts or the synthesis that BTA during our years was trying to go through. So I can really only give, and you can hardly see it, there's a picture there of the Avenue N East 14th Street campus, which many of you, I understand, aren't familiar with, just like I'm not familiar with the earlier campuses. All right? In fact,
Do you have several slides?
Yeah, just a few.
I think this is your forward.
Oh, thanks. This is my picture of my years at BTA on Emin 14th, what it meant, and sort of an idea of what we were going through when we were at BTA. And I think what we were going through is what led us to become what we are. Rumor has it, as far as this building goes, rumor has it that it was originally a movie theater studio. Although no one could ever figure out why in the world a movie studio would have two classrooms, two school buildings, one for boys and one for girls, that were connected and separated only by a door. And in fact, it's a question till this day, with all the crazy things that we did, the Maseh Kundas that went on in the years of BTA, and I think with each progressive year they increased, no one could ever figure out why no one had the guts to cross over to the girls' school and go through those doors. Right? Rarely. I won't say never, but, oh yeah, everybody raised the eye. We went through it. I'm sorry. For us, it was the proverbial red line that couldn't be crossed. We would run through the girls' campus, we would look at them staring out the walls, staring out the windows, but we would never go over, and we can't understand that. But this was the campus, and it was really a beautiful campus. We were in high school, and this is where I'd like to give a little bit of historical perspective. Lamrot that I'm not a sociologist or a historian. We have sociologists and historians up to our ears here. But we were in high school during the demonstration period. Civil rights demonstrations, Vietnam War demonstrations. We were towards the end of the Vietnam War. In fact, our year when we graduated was probably the first year that none of our graduates attended any of the yeshivot after high school that were associated with the Vietnam War yeshivot. Yeshiva, yeah. We didn't have to because the draft was over, but we still lived from 68 to 72 in a period of social unrest demonstrations, which many of you remember. And it filtered down to our years in high school. Okay. There were the Soviet Jewry demonstrations, which we became very active in. There were Israel demonstrations that we became very active in. And this is where I think our years are perhaps somewhat different than some of the other years that we heard about until now. Where we were, even though we were maturing, developmentally maturing, or in some respects we were really stupid, but we were also very politically active. And this was a period where certain things happened at BTA that I think hadn't happened before. I'll give just one example. This was a period where, I'm sure some of you remember, Rabbi Kahana came to speak at BTA to stir up. Also a BTA graduate. It was an alumni visit. And he came to stir up excitement about the JDL, and I don't remember what it was. And here you can see the conflict that was going on. This was a classic case of establishment versus anti-establishment. Should he be allowed to speak in the school and address the school assembly or not? It was the discussions, I guess, for days or weeks. And at the end, Rabbi Kahana spoke outside to a group of seniors who went outside to listen to him. Nobody remembers what he said, I'm sure. But this picture, I think, says a lot about the air that was at the time of our period at BTA. Now, what this led to was a different type of BTA student, I think, for those few years. Because what happened then, and here are very poor pictures, but I'll just give you an idea. What happened then was there was a sort of Jewish activity surge in BTA. If there was always the SOY, the yeshivish type group, the Rabbi Yogel kids, there now was organized, in addition, a Jewish Action Committee. And we worked together with the SOY. We organized Soviet Jewry rallies, we organized Israel activities, we had Hebrew music and Israeli music going on in between classes. It was sort of trying to bring a bit of Bnei Akiva and Zionism and Israel into BTA, and it had, I think, a fairly strong effect. But it was always with a bit of the anti-establishment, that yohara of high school students who feel that, as somebody mentioned before, we know everything. So we even had some things like, I'm sure Rabbi Zuroff remembers this, we did a poll, an anonymous poll where all the students in the 11th and 12th grade answered some very, very intimate questions that related to their Jewish practice, their religious convictions, their things in that area relating also to things like drug use. And we thought that this would be the greatest thing for the school, because then we'd be able to identify, the administration would be able to identify the problems that were going on in the school, and we'd be able to come up with some creative, effective ways of re-education, and everybody would be happy. You weren't very happy, if I remember correctly. And it's one of those many things. I think we have, each of us have a tremendous amount of hakarat atov to thank Rabbi Zuroff for. I think each of us probably, and certainly judging from what I've heard until now, we also have a tremendous amount to apologize to Rabbi Zuroff for. And on this one, thank you. Thank you. Okay, in addition to try to make the school more Jewish, we even set up an all-boys cheerleading squad for the Uyghurs. Right? And there it is. You can see us. We would have kumsitzes at halftime on midcourt, because it pasnish for girls to do cheerleading, and this is part of the religious revival of BTA in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was very, very, I think, effective. It's certainly very enjoyable. I enjoyed it. Okay. And just the final story that I'll tell you in this respect is the chagigas, right, which nobody mentioned until now. We had two chagigas like everybody. We had the Hanukkah chagiga and we had the Purim chagiga. The Hanukkah chagiga apparently was in such poor taste that year, unusually poor taste, much worse than any chagigas that any of you have put on, that it was actually canceled, which led to a religious revival, so that by the Purim chagiga, the Jewish Action Committee and the SOY got together and made a real Jewish Purim chagiga, where we had dancing, Hebrew dancing, Israeli dancing, Divrei Torah, and the write-up of it and the description of it was that everyone was on cloud nine. I think here even the chagiga, and here you can see us dancing like a yeshiva. A study of contrast, analysis of good and evil, a view of spiritual and the physical, and introspection of schizophrenia can be described as the distinction between the Hanukkah and Purim chagigot, etc., etc. The scene students, rather T.A. Bochurim, right? With the rabbi dancing, stamping, running around with such religious fervor that even the Holy One himself would smile. Goffin on the guitar, etc., etc., etc. Crescendo never reached before in YUHSBB. Right, so this was the period that we went through, and I'd like to end on a personal note that more or less relates to the same concept. In our senior year, Rabbi Zuroff asked myself and my friend Moshe Bork, he was a serious guy, he asked us to represent BTA in going to hear the Yartzeit Russia of the Rav at YU. Now, I don't have to explain to everyone here what the Yartzeit Russia of the Rav is, but for high school pishers like us to be asked by the principal of our school to represent the school to go to that, so not only was the drasha itself a tremendous experience, and to this day it was a major effect on my life, but just being chosen by Rabbi Zuroff for an event like that was a very, very, very meaningful thing for me, and personally, I have a tremendous amount of hakarat tov for that. Okay, so what I tried to do is share with you a very brief picture of what BTA was like in our years, of young boys with all the stupidity and seriousness together, this conflict, this schizophrenia, at times in conflict with the establishment, but always for meaningful and good reasons, maybe naive, mixed with Yora. Boys who, on the one hand, can show off in front of the central girls who are hanging out the windows from the central building, but on the other hand, setting up an all-boys right? Thank you. Forgot my English. All right? And having the ability to raise a group of tough, challenging students who were at various stages of maturation. So if I think of one word that really epitomizes Rabbi Zuroff and what he did for the school, which allowed us to reach what we've reached, there's only one word that comes to my mind, and that's patience. The amount of patience that Rabbi Zuroff needed to watch us, to follow us, to guide us, and to live with us, I think is unusual, and I think we all have a tremendous amount of, there's no Dvar Torah here, just Hakarat HaTov. We should have a tremendous amount of Hakarat HaTov to Rabbi Zuroff. And like everyone else, I wish him and his wife many, many years of nachat and health from the family, and especially from all the students.
Moshe Ben Zion is the Deputy Chairman of the Chemistry Department at Bar-Ilan University, aka Mel Benson, has put a huge amount of work into this PowerPoint presentation. Are you ready, Mel? So Mel, when I say begin, begin, begin.
Let me just start off by saying that while I try to approach globally the world of BTA, this presentation happens to be very Church in Bedford oriented, since this was my home for 4 years. Okay, let's get started. During one's 4 years at high school, generally a period of intense adolescent changes, a person often finds himself at extreme odds with the accepted figures of authority. Certainly, such was the case at BTA. Rabbi Zuroff wanted to run efficiently a high school. We, the students, on the other hand, were interested in getting away with whatever we could. Sometimes we succeeded, sometimes we were caught. We learned to avoid him as much as possible. Many loathed his exercise of authority, but once we left high school, our perspective changed completely, and we came to appreciate that Rabbi Zuroff, exactly what he did for us during those tumultuous years. This is clearly evidenced by the overwhelming enthusiastic response we had in planning this event, and by all of you who are here today. On a personal note, as I look back, I have to admit that the suspension that Rabbi Zuroff meted out to me in 1959 was really deserved. The great Chinese educator and philosopher Confucius was known for the following: if your plan is for 100 years, educate children. We're here today, the BTA YUHSB Israel Alumni Tribute to Rabbi Abraham Zuroff on his 90th birthday. During Rabbi Zuroff's tenure at BTA was housed at 3 different locations. Each building came to represent and symbolize a unique period in BTA's colorful history. The first was President Street from 1945 to 1954, where Rabbi Zuroff was the administrator. From 1955 to 1967, at Church in Bedford, he became the principal. 1968 until he left in 1976 on East 14th Street, which I've never heard called East 14th Street, but rather the Avenue M building. He was both principal and supervisor of the 4 Yeshiva University high schools. On our first day as freshmen, we were introduced to Rabbi Zuroff's famous behavioral code of conduct, something he reminded us of many, many times during our 4 years in the hallowed halls of BTA. And I expect you, all of you, to conduct yourselves in a manner befitting a student of Torah. May 1814, Napoleon is exiled to the island of Elba. September 1962, Effie is exiled to the island of Manhattan. There were many, many unique things about BTA. Two of the things I remember and I'm pointing out here. BTA had a marvelous advanced physical education program consisting of ping pong and knock hockey. Any felon that was caught playing slam bang knock hockey was paid in command by Harry Morse, the physical education director, with a play slam bang, will you idiot? On the other hand, we had Senor Cantor. Senor Cantor was unique in that he was able to teach French, Spanish, and Latin. And very often did, depending on how the class greeted him when he walked in. If they said bonjour, he taught them French. If he said buenos dias, he would teach them Spanish. He even very often read the roll call from Central. Everybody answered present. A person's worth is often judged by the riches that he has managed to accrue during his lifetime. If we were to take a look in Rabbi Zuroff's treasure chest, what do you think we would find? Rabbi Zuroff's treasure chest is filled with the most valuable of treasures, all his students, a living testimony to his life's achievements. Kol ha'marbe betalmidim marbe bechokma. Adam gadol va'ashir b'Torah ma'amid talmidim harbe. Rabbi Zuroff had us only for 4 years. In spite of that, he was able to make a marked impression on our lives. He was able to guide us in the right direction, teach us about the responsibilities that we will soon be facing as we headed out on our own. Some of his boys turned out to be stars. Class of 1949, Martin Kahana. From his yearbook, you can see that even then he knew unfortunately, he came to an early end, and we are all very sorry about that. Class of 1955, Alan Dershowitz, who credits Rabbi Zuroff with his astute guidance, which led him to his present career. Dershowitz, find a job where you can use your mouth and not your brain. You should become a lawyer. I came across this cartoon when I was Googling Alan Dershowitz. The judge is telling the court clerk, I'm afraid I'll have to recuse myself from this trial. I can't stand Alan Dershowitz. We spoke to Alan, and while he would have liked to come, he wasn't able to, but he said that he would send a greeting, and indeed he did.
A mazel tov, Rabbi Zuroff, on reaching the near biblical age of 90. I was not your best student. I have in front of me my report card. Academy. 60 in mathematics, 65 in Hebrew, that's out of 100. 60 in physics, not very good. I was not as respectful as I could have been. So after all these years, I'm sorry. Maybe it turned out best for both of us. I not to go to Yeshiva University, where my parents wanted me to go. Instead, I went to Brooklyn College, where I did okay. So Rabbi Zuroff, we both done well.
Class of 1963, one of the craziest kids that ever managed to make his way into BTA, Marty Ritholtz. I took out what was written under his name in the Elkanite. I think you people have to see this. Marty was able to provide continuous entertainment with his nutty stunts and yet maintain one of the highest averages in the class. Our man from Jersey led Arista and the GO to sometimes confused but generally successful terms, despite the fact that his jumping out of a window left some doubt in the tall one's mind as to his suitability for the offices. Of course, somebody as crazy as this, what is he going to turn out to be? The Honorable Rabbi Martin E. Ritholtz, Supreme Court Justice in Queens. (1966), Dov Zakheim. Now, Dov Zakheim, on the other hand, is not necessarily remembered on the positive side. If those of you who remember the time, during President Ronald Reagan's administration, he served as Deputy Undersecretary of Defense. He came to Israel to pass final judgment on the Israel Aircraft Lavi project. And we still have to give credit where credit is due. Not everybody becomes Deputy Undersecretary of Defense in the United States. Okay, now I start second part of the presentation where I go through the years of BTA, and just 2 days ago we managed to come up with a slogan that we felt epitomized BTA and BTA students. I would like to say that I was able to find most of the alumni that are living in Israel, the Elkanites from 1948 until 1970 are online in the internet. 1950 was missing. The years from 1971 upward were not on the internet, and I have to thank Rabbi Zuroff's daughter Elaine, who worked with me and helped me find some of the pictures. Some of you may not be in there, and the problem is that we didn't have the information in time, or information was erroneous. However, let's proceed. The President Street years. The first graduating class in 1958. Aaron Skaist, who was supposed to be here today, but his grandson is getting his kumta from the army, and at the last minute asked to be excused. These were the faculty for the first graduating class. I think we can recognize some of the people: Harry Allen, Marty Lilker, Rabbi Zuroff, Joe Strum, Dr. Sapphire, Sam Leibowitz, Senior Cantor, Dr. Lichtenstein. (1949). I included here, although he's not living in Israel, Irv Foreman, who served as the coach for the BTA basketball team for many, many years. 1951, 1952. I'll give you a chance to just look at yourselves and enjoy yourselves as you once were. I believe that's Bob Bassell. I'm not sure. Right. 1953, the first year that BTA played in Madison Square Garden. 1954. Sam Leibowitz still trying to blow up the physics lab. The church in Bedford year started in 1955, and with them entered our beloved Yetta Rosenman. (1956). 1956 was our last year playing as BTA, as you can see on the basketball shirts. 1957, we were already known as YUHSB. The Gemara exam. How we used to fight to sit in this position and get to read the Mishnah, so we wouldn't have to know the Gemara. We had no gym. Where did we play softball? In the backyard. Oh, I'm sorry.
Put it on mute.
Okay.
Don't go when you know.
Okay. And last but not least, with Yetta Rosenman's presence, every year there was a contest, and every year there was a winner. (1958). Danny Levine's Sam's son, David Rosenman, Yetta's nephew, I believe. This was interesting. This year, the Elkanite had as its cover an astronomical picture of a galaxy, and I wondered why. And then I remembered, October 1957, the Russians launched the Sputnik. And I remember them coming into our class at Yeshiva Olam Moshe and telling us that we have an obligation to go into science. And I have a feeling that that must have influenced the graduating class that year. George Davidson, who was very unfortunately overlooked by the Nobel Prize Committee for his experiments with the crushed can. Mr. Davidson gave tons of homework, which we submitted. He never looked at it, he never read it. However, he let us know that he had it by stamping it with the only stamp that he had, and our grade was calculated by the number of excellence each person had in his file. 1959. Slow-Mo Septimus, my favorite math teacher, who could never teach geometry without a high shiba before the class. Biology by Mr. Schiff. And At day's end, 6:10, I thought that was a poignant picture. 1960, around that time, Rabbi Clark came into BTA. Eventually, he served as guidance counselor. The Heinz can of soup. I always wondered, where did John get those teeny tiny cans of tomato soup that he sold in the concession? I had never seen them anywhere before. 1961. Now we are going to shoot you, Rabbi Clark. During the church in Bedford years, we caught Rabbi Zuroff and Rabbi Wolfson cheering the Uyghurs on. My year, 1962. Mersch Lusselberg somehow never got around to getting his picture taken for the Elkanite. We had to catch him as he came out of the pool during swimming practice. But we managed to dress him anyway after his year in Hakshara. Rabbi Dardak, who could teach dikduk like nobody else. As a matter of fact, the Megillah, he used to teach us Megillah Esther. I still have the Chamesh Megillot with all the annotations. I refuse to part with it. It's still in my library. Rabbi Dardak, expert in dikduk. Some of you may remember this from the Gashash HaChiver. Ech korem lachukchuk shel hakumkum. (1963). Mr. Soshak, our Hebrew teacher. He was known by everybody, at least by the students, as Chuck. Not one of my better experiences. And here were banners from various high schools that somehow managed to find their way into the GO office until Rabbi Zuroff caught us. And then we had to present them back to the different high schools. (1964). Mr. Becker always complained he was surrounded by dodos. 1965, I call the 2S Aliyah year. This was the year that they did away with the draft deferments, and it was not a very good year to win the lottery. (1966), the good doctor's final diagnosis. (1967), which was the last year at church in Bedford. We say farewell to an old friend. And as she looks today, the old gray mare, she sure ain't what she used to be. Our new digs, BTA's new digs, I wasn't part of it, on Avenue M. 1968 was a massive Aliyah year, and I had to use 2 pages for the kids that came. And I'm sure many of us can't forget Jack Yarmush, the omnipresent candy man, who kept our candy machines filled all the time. I doubt if anybody's ever seen him with a jacket and tie like this. 1969. As pointed out before, Rabbi Zuroff was always in charge of proctoring the SATs, the Regents Scholarships exam, and he was very, very exact in his instructions to the students. When I say break the seal, break the seal, break the seal. When I say begin, begin, begin. So much so that even the fire extinguishers in BTA had to follow his orders. If you can't read it, when told to lift off the hook, invert and aim, lift off the hook, invert and aim. $1970, yet it's still going strong. 1972, picture of Rabbi Bamzer, which I titled "The Blind Leading the Dumb." (1973). First, what you thought was the Rebbe's coffee break was actually a remedial course in Talmud. And Rabbi Zuroff very often would sneak up behind us and call your name, and as you would shake in fear and say, "What did I do now?" he would point to the floor and say, "Pick up that paper over there." He was very, very careful about maintaining a clean and clear hallway. 1974. 1975 and 76, which were Rabbi Zuroff's last years in BTA. Rabbi Zuroff bids us farewell. BTA's loss is YU's gain. And we will finish off. Remember. Wait, we're not done yet. The years have been good to him. 5 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, over 2,000 students, and here he is, Sandik, and his newest great-grandchild.
7 grandchildren.
7. Oh, just the information I got was wrong. Okay. Ken Yerbu. He was Sandik at his latest great-grandchild's break. But remember. Now, a final slide. To the alumni that made it to Israel but were not able to be with us today. I included also Sarah Unterberg-Blaustein, class of 65 in our sister school Central, who was murdered in a pass-by shooting by Neve Daniel on Isru Chag Shavuos. sorry to end on a somber note, but thank you very much.
Now, gentlemen and a few ladies, the moment we have all been waiting for. It is my honor to call upon Bobby Neymark to present a plaque to Rabbi Zuroff. Bobby was really the driving force behind this event today and deserves a big round of applause. Bobby, before you come up, I need 1 minute. I must tell everyone about the first time I ever spoke to Bob Neymark. It was the fall of 1963. My brother and Bob were seniors at BTA. I was in the 8th grade at Crown Heights Yeshiva. I had to be in school late that day for some reason. My brother had to be in BTA by 9 a.m. It was 9:30 and he was asleep, so I figured he was probably going to be late. The phone rang and a voice on the other end, I picked up the phone, it was 9:30 in the morning, a voice said, "Execute Blue Plan." I ran to my brother in bed. I said, Eddie, what's going on? Somebody called and said, "Execute Blue Plan." He said, "Oh, that's Neymark telling me where we're going to meet today." Had something to do with a certain enterprise on Snyder Avenue. I'm not going to discuss it. Bobby Neymark has gone way beyond the Blue Plan, and he's now going to present the plaque to Rabbi Zuroff.
I don't believe I'm standing here in front of Rabbi Zuroff and not in his office, which I spent many, many times there, even once or twice with my parents. But anyway, it is somewhat, I shouldn't say somewhat, it is very, very daunting to be standing here about to present to Rabbi Zuroff a plaque in honor of his being our principal of BTA for almost 3 decades. I recall that almost 48 years ago to this day, on June 20th, 1964, I received from Rabbi Zuroff at the graduation commencement ceremony in Washington Heights my diploma from Yeshiva University High School for Boys. We all utilized this document to further our education, and eventually many of us chose a career or profession that was in harmony with our Jewish upbringing. First and foremost, doctors, lawyers, teachers, professors, accountants, and honest businessmen. That's just to mention a few. And most importantly, Talmidei Chachamim, Keneged Kulam. Simultaneously, we decided to fulfill a dream that our ancestors prayed for, and we moved with our families out of Brooklyn and settled in Israel. I am not certain which of these 2 accomplishments you, Rabbi Zuroff, would judge as more important, but I would not be surprised if you would say that living here in Israel and raising our future generation outweighs one's professional secular advancement. The fact that your students have attained both goals is evidence of the education they received in their youth from you. Would anyone have dreamt in their wildest imagination 40, 50, 60 years ago that you would have had several hundred students who graduated from BTA living here in Israel? The fact is that we are all here with our children and grandchildren and friends, living and practicing the most important mitzvah that our Torah has commanded us to fulfill, Yishuv Haaretz. Rabbi Zuroff, you are well aware of the accomplishments of your graduates. The newspaper articles written in the Jerusalem Post and in the Jewish press recently clearly testifies to this. We all thank you for how you had assisted us during our 4 years in BTA. As was said before by some of the speakers, it was not only an educational institution, but simply a fun place to be from 9 a.m. until 6:10 each day. To think about it now, I don't know why I played hooky a few times if I enjoyed myself being in BTA during the day, but you know, as David recalled, his brother and I, sometimes we decided to leave for a few days. Those of us who took advantage of the academic opportunities were able to gain knowledge both in religious and secular subjects. And those of us who were interested in combining this with social activities were able to enjoy themselves with their friends, either at Yuger basketball games in the evening or at the bowling alley during the daytime. We simply enjoyed ourselves and even sometimes learned a thing or two as you provided us with Rabbanim and teachers who guided us through these formative years of our lives. There is much to thank you for, but if I had to choose one specific thing, it would be for giving us the foundation and springboard we attained under your guidance and supervision in helping us live our lives as dedicated Jews in America and now in Eretz Yisrael. On a short personal note, I would like to recall an episode that occurred approximately 10 years ago. I was at an event that Rabbi Zuroff also attended. I approached him after not seeing him for many years and wasn't sure if he would recognize me, as I have changed a bit during those 40 years, even though I don't have a white beard. When I mentioned my name to him, his reaction was, "Name walk? Oh yes, you came to BTA after graduating Eitz Chaim Elementary School of Borough Park." I was marveled at his ability to remember, after reviewing thousands and thousands of applications for acceptance to his school, which elementary school I had graduated from. Before presenting a plaque honoring Rabbi Zuroff, I don't know if people saw it when you walked in, but it was at the table upstairs. I would once again like to mention the names of the alumni who participated in the planning committee and gave many hours and hours of their, even days and days of their time in helping this monumental event to take place. In chronological and not alphabetical order, David, you did alphabetical, I'll do chronological. They are Dr. Mel Ben Sion, class of 62. Dr. Yehuda Weinrab, class of 62. Rabbi Dr. Professor Aryeh Frimmer, class of 64. Dr. Zev Milty Gerstel, class of 65. Rabbi Dr. Stewie Zwider, class of 68. David Martin, and I cannot say more than that, class of 68. And Dr. Erwin Mansdorf, class of 68. This list reminds me of an interview that I was once held with Henry Kissinger. The journalist asked him how he would like to be referred to in an article. Dr. Kissinger, Professor Kissinger, Mr. Secretary, etc. His response was, "Your Excellency will suffice." Although two pillars in the foundation of BTA are no longer with us, their close relatives who both graduated from TA in 1958 and made Aliyah are among the guests here today. I am referring to Mr. Sam Levine, Alav HaShalom, and Mrs. Yetta Rosenman, Zichrona Livracha. As I read to you, Rabbi Dr. Zuroff, that which is written in this plaque, I take the liberty of saying that these words are not only those of the planning committee, but represent the thoughts and feelings of the close to 150 people who have joined us here today, as well as the 1,000 to 2,000 students who are not present. לרבנו ומנהלנו הרב דוקטור אברהם זורוף היקר, בהגיעו לגיל 90, נברכו בך אלפי תלמידיך, שכרך הרבה מאוד. With profound gratitude for the 3 decades of your caring dedication and outstanding leadership, and providing a sound foundation for our path in life, and for the exemplary education both in general studies and Limudei Kodesh that we received in BTA. In deep admiration and appreciation, the graduates of Yeshiva University High School Brooklyn BTA living in Israel, Ki arech yamim ushnot chayim b'shalom yosifu lecha. Thank you, Rabbi Zuroff.
It is with deep feelings that I welcome all of you who have chosen to give up a Friday to help me and my family celebrate my 90th birthday. Thank you, all of you who have taken the time to come from near and far in Israel to show your appreciation for that which BTA might have contributed to your lives. I also want to take this opportunity to express a shevach v'hodaya to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who has made all this possible. To my wife, Esther, who has given of her mind, heart, and soul to make possible the attainment of our goals. I spent many significant years as an undergraduate, smicha, and graduate student in Yeshiva University. For many of those years, I was privileged to study under and learn from the Rav and from Dr. Belkin. The lessons they taught me, how to learn, how to approach a difficult passage in Gemara, and how to reason and solve problems, were enhanced by one more unstated lesson, and that was To learn is wonderful, but to be able to give the gift of learning to others is more precious. It was what inspired me to go into chinuch and led me to be your principal. When Dr. Belkin, the second president of Yeshiva University, made the decision in 1945 to start a yeshiva high school in Brooklyn, I went with Dr. Sapphire, the principal of MTA, to check out a possible building. There on President Street, we saw a huge building that we thought was the location. Upon entering the armory and inquiring, we were directed across the street. And there was a small, ramshackle house with few rooms. It was a bit of a surprise, but with time, the building was expanded. A lunchroom was added, and it was beautified just a bit. However, for gym, the boys had to go across the street to a rented storefront with a large open space. Later, we moved to the corner of Bedford and Church Avenue, and Mrs. Roseman Zichrona Livracha, the secretary, joined our staff. We now had a true high school building. But still, for gym, the boys had to play outside in that schoolyard. Soon after, Central for Girls opened its doors just a few blocks away. It afforded an opportunity for the boys and girls to meet at the local pizza store. Later yet, we moved to Midwood, where the facilities were new and modern. It had all the conveniences expected of a top-notch high school. Now we finally had our own gym, and now the boys and girls schools were separated by a mere door. It made socializing that much easier. Throughout the years, the students of our yeshiva were the best and brightest, full of spirit and fire. There was the day a subscription to Playboy arrived at our home. And then there was the day that a pepperoni pizza arrived. And then there was the weekend when the phone rang repeatedly in response to an ad in a local paper that offered a relatively new car for $150. As some of you might know, we never had a car. The boys who constituted BTA were clearly not necessarily the best behaved students. And at times, it was a challenge to compete and contend with them. However, in the final analysis, I look back with pride on each and every one of the students. Thank God, it is not our years in high school that determine our ultimate value. Rather, it is how we function as adults that determines our true quality. The graduates of BTA have entered a wide spectrum: academia, medicine, law, many areas of science, business, and at least of equal importance, Torah and Jewish education. As adults, where is this? Just one moment, excuse me for a moment. The fact is that we are, just a minute, just 1 minute. Here it is. Each of you exemplifies the qualities of warmth, friendship, and chesed as evidenced by your attendance. Most importantly, look around and see how many of you live here in Eretz Yisrael. Kol HaKavod. My wish for you is that you should have pride in yourselves, our homeland, your past, and your lives of Torah and Yiddishkeit. Thank you. Now that the statute of limitations has run out, I would like to know if anyone here today is responsible for the Playboy magazine. Okay. That's it.
All right?
All right, yeah, okay.
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 You're awesome.
Good?
David.
1 second. Wait, you're late. 1 second. And in addition, it is today, Sunday, the 67th wedding anniversary of Rabbi and Mrs. Zuroff, and their great-grandchildren are giving them flowers to Mrs. Zuroff. Bring it there so you What, now dessert? Why not? What, is it
Chaim v'sholom